Raz. Raz. Co?
AmCham Slovakia. And because we are still in the very first month of the year 2025, so let me, on behalf of AmCham Slovakia, wish you, your colleague and your companies much success, resilience, and economic prosperity in this year. And in AmCham Slovakia, we decided to focus this year on competitiveness of Slovakia. Not easy topic. And competitiveness stands on the important pillars such as talent produced by the country, or the innovative and the motivational economic environment. Also very important, trustful institution. And therefore, AmCham decided, and also based on the current economic and political situation, and based on needs of our members, to focus on the very important topics, such as competitiveness, not just the Slovakia, but also the competitiveness of Europe, competitiveness of and cooperation with the US, and also we would like to focus on the level of the regulation in this country, and we would like to focus on the consolidation package, obviously, and the environment challenges, and energy readiness, and the generation of the talents, research, development, but also the digitalization of the government administration, and also the trust in the governmental institution, as I already mentioned, and all unified by the competitiveness. Now, how the Slovakia stands in the competitiveness, let's see some numbers. Global Competitiveness Index ranked Slovakia 39th out of the 141 countries. IMD World Competitiveness Ranking is ranked Slovakia on 37th out of the 64 countries, and Global Innovation Index ranked Slovakia 45th out of 132 countries. Good, bad, could be better. Let's talk about it. What we will at AmCham do for the topic of the competitiveness, we already started. Actually, this week is a full of the events dedicated to the competitiveness. On Tuesday, we kick off with the very interesting topic, which is the Space Act. Space Act will be implemented from February 1st, 25 in Slovakia. And I don't know if you know, in Slovakia, we already have the 60 companies who are working deeply with the space industry. At the very same day, in the different city in Košice, we organized a very different event dedicated to the topic of the future of the employer. I think it's important to know what is the future of our employers, and it is good to have the discussion among the HR community in Bratislava, in Košice, and discuss this important topic. Yesterday, with váš lekár and Mr. Marcinko, who is today also here with us, we discussed how important is for the productivity healthy employer. And I think this is clear for all of us in the room that investment into the healthy employers is our future as well, and has direct impact on the productivity. And today, our event is dedicated to the biotechnology. And this is not the first event which we organized together with Crowdberry, our partner and our member of the AmCham. And we have already seen showcases of the multiplex DX or the DNA ERAN and others. But there is still a lot of room for the discussion on this topic, and there is still need of the mutual cooperation and the combination of the private and public finances and partnership building. Investment in healthcare and biotechnology directly supports the country competitiveness for sure by fostering economic growth, innovation, and global leadership. It creates a high-paid jobs. That's what we need in Slovakia. Attracts both domestic and international investment, such investment improve resilience to health crisis, enhance trade opportunities, and attract top talents and international partnership. According to the OECD report on biotechnology and economic growth, biotechnology can significantly enhance the country competitiveness in biotech and R&D through increased prosperity and productivity, job creation, and export growth of biotech-related sectors. Now, looks like we have a great opportunity to hear a lot about this part or this sector, and Slovakia has access to a wide area of the EU funds and programs that can support the development of the biotech innovation. Horizon Europe, ERDF, HICEE, and other programs. And it is our duty to utilize them for the innovation. So I believe that also today's event will give us new information, but also open the new opportunities for us. And now let me call on the stage our dear colleague, member, but also the ex-colleague and ex-employer of AmCham Slovakia, Anka Michalková. Anka, please join me on the stage. Thank you, and I wish you a very good event.
Thank you very much, Martina, and very warm welcome to everybody. I'm glad that I got the chance to be the moderator for today's event, and let us delve into the dynamic area of healthcare and biotech and investment. Today, we will be talking a lot about how to strengthen the connection between the CEE region, not only in Slovakia, but how to connect the region as such. And of course, one of the central themes will be how to attract the additional capital that is required for growth, and also how to build bridges, because what we want to attract is some high-quality international investors and also attract the global talent, because that's what we need to support us. And maybe one of the topics that I want to point to today especially is how can our speakers maybe identify some of the actionable insights, how to reverse the brain drain that we are sort of experiencing at the moment. So hopefully the conclusion of today's event will not only be a good discussion, but that we will have some actions and some inspirations for the policymakers, for the public sector, but also for the private sector, and the connections will be created also through the networking that will be provided today. So we will start off with some EU-wide framework with the Draghi report, and then we will hear an exciting presentation from Crowdberry on how the region is doing and what are some gaps and opportunities. And finally, we will have a panel discussion where we will really hear from investors, we will hear from some analysts, and altogether we will try to wrap it up with some conclusions that we can take away. So just to jump right in, I would like to invite to join me on stage Daniel Gašpar, the managing partner of Crowdberry, and Radim Dvořák, the acting head of the representation of European Commission here. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting us.
Good morning. Happy New Year too. Thank you.
Yes, it's still allowed to say Happy New Year, so that's good. It's still January. I would like to say that we are very much excited to have you join our discussion as well. You have the Slido and you can see the hashtag there, Biotech. Please do join us and ask questions, comment. And of course, we welcome personal questions as well. So anytime you feel like saying something, well, not anytime really, but I will give you some space to ask personal questions as well at some points in the discussion. So why are we starting with the Draghi report? Last year, the former president of the European Central Bank, Mario Draghi, issued a report, The Future of European Competitiveness. And this was presented to the European Commission in September last year. And what Draghi is speaking about is an existential challenge that will require us in Europe to make some compromises on the standard of living, but also on the sovereignty in certain sectors. And I think healthcare is a good example of a sector that is not really in full competence of the EU. And that's why it will be interesting to discuss how to deal with it in terms of the competitiveness. Because we are used to having welfare state in Europe, we're used to having very robust healthcare systems, and at the same time, we do want to be competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So Draghi is very frank in saying, like, EU has been really dragging behind the United States and China for the last 20 years. So we should probably start doing something differently in order to be more competitive and in order to tap into the strength of productivity. So gentlemen, first question just to kick off to you is, if you look at this report And if you look at the topic we're discussing here today, which is competitiveness and how to attract more investment into CEE, what are some of the key takeaways that you would like for the audience to think about for the beginning of our discussion? And I'll start with Mr. Dvořák.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, difficult question. The Draghi report obviously is not an easy reading. It's a rather bitter diagnosis of the state of the Union in terms of competitiveness and its position globally. Well, it is being translated, or it has been translated, into the work plan of the Commission. The Draghi report reflects, or is reflected, in the political guidelines of the new Commission that Ursula von der Leyen presented last year when the new Commission took office, but also more practically is being translated into a roadmap that will basically govern the course of the Union in the next 5 years. And this is something that we call the competitiveness compass. Now, the competitiveness compass is a compound to provide systemic support. And we need the laws for business, we need less red tape, we need easier business in Europe. And we will also be looking at specific sectors in the first place. To give you an example, already on the 30th of January, there will be a strategic dialogue on the future of the automotive industry this time. So another thing that will be crucial and relevant and important for Slovakia. We will be looking at the single market and how to make it more operational. We will develop comprehensive horizontal strategy to boost our single market, and I think we will get back to that when we talk about the finances. But let me mention two things that are important in connection with the Draghi report and with the competitiveness compass. It has two sides. Internal side, like I said, we need really to invest our efforts into creating a deeper and more liquid capital markets. Capital Markets Union will be the buzzword of the next 5 years. And we will be creating something that we call at this moment a European Savings and Investments Union, which will help us use and tap into the existing savings in the European Union into tangible investments. The second is simplification, making business easier. We are proposing a single set of rules, which we call the 28th regime. I will explain that later. And the third internal factor is energy. Obviously, everybody realizes that we have a problem with energy prices. Now, and there is also an external side to the competitiveness compass and to the European Union's competitiveness. And that is a new economic foreign policy. We need to have partners globally across the globe. We need secure supply chains for our companies. We need better access to raw materials. We need to protect ourselves from the various dependencies that Europe is so famous for, be it dependency on fossils, Russia, even nuclear, etc. We need to strengthen our partnership. Well, we have seen what is happening in the US with the new administration of President Donald Trump. The decisions made in the US are rapid, and they will certainly have an impact on the EU. We, at our level in the Commission, of course, we are interested in engaging with the US. We are preparing pragmatic discussion to avoid tariffs, for example. We would like to have an open, pragmatic discussion to avoid any escalation in trade measures. And there are many possibilities to discuss. But there is also, and I will be very quick, there is also a side effect of the US administration and President Trump's assertiveness, and that is positive for Europe. Partners around the world are coming closer to us now. They want to do business with the EU. We have signed a number of trade agreements recently, just to name a few. Mercosur, Mexico, things that have been negotiated for decades. We will have a trade agreement, hopefully, with Malaysia. We would like to boost partnership with India. This all addresses our dependencies in many aspects, like medicines, for example. All college of the European Commission is traveling to India in the spring to sort of underline the importance of this. So we see positive engagement. We are reliable and trustworthy partners for many places and countries and companies in the world because of our robust systems, our respect for rule of law, our predictability, our stability as compared to other giants that are there in the world like China and the US.
Thank you. So, you know, taking out from what you said and tapping into Daniel Liu, because you look at it from a very different perspective, you're saying some of the key words for the year are competitiveness, capital, how to attract capital and investments, but also, you know, balance it out with the savings, because that's something important. How to stay protected, how to deal with the dependencies that we have, how to boost the trade through different partnerships. But you're also saying that, of course, we have to, and this was, you know, we have to somehow be ready for the other competitive markets that come in. And I think we will be talking about, you know, how to do that as well, because this environment is not isolated. We have the US doing something for the investment. We have other countries doing a lot for the investment. So how can we be simpler in that? Simplicity was one of the things that you mentioned. Daniel, when you look at it from some of these key points of the Draghi report, how is it relevant for a platform like Crowdberry that is really thinking a lot about investments?
I think I'm not allowed to say what actually blew through my mind.
No, say it. You know, you have to now, you know.
Okay, we'll get there in a second topic. Our task is to set a scene for this whole morning. And Draghi, Professor Draghi, actually had a second lifetime moment with his report, I believe. The first one was this famous bazooka when he saved the euro with 2 sentences, actually one. So, and I think this is setting a very good tone for the next 5 years for the Commission. We hear that a lot of things are actually happening pretty quickly, which is indeed positive. From our perspective, and now to answer your question, the DNA of what we do, the platform of Crowdberry, is basically addressing the report of Mario Draghi since 2015-16, when Crowdberry was established. We are mobilizing private capital, and the reason why this is extremely important, I think we'll get to it, and it's going to be a topic of the whole day, whole morning, is that the patient private capital is the necessity, is basically the soil of businesses that are embedded in the deep tech, biotech space and need a lot of time to develop and a lot of capital develop. And then they are able to provide the ones who are not failing but thriving, the added value, the higher productivity to the economy, but also for the investors. And one word has not been mentioned in the Mario Draghi report kickoff this morning, and that's productivity. Mm-hmm. And this is something which basically is the keystone of the report, because Professor Draghi is just saying that we are lagging behind with our productivity in comparison to US, and the client, the patient, gets better service, and there is much more staying in the bottom line to invest, but also in the biotech businesses, which we will probably talk about later. So last sentence, the report actually says that this is the time where we still have possibilities to do something, because the trains in China and US are going super fast. Yeah.
Well, I still want to a little bit not grill you here, but I do want to go into a little bit deeper into some practicalities, because let's imagine it a little bit better. We're talking in general what the report brings, but I was wondering, like, if you could give some maybe specific examples. So what does it mean specifically in the biotech and healthcare?
Exactly. I mean, specifically for the private capital market, for instance, Slovakia is actually deploying 2 basis points of the GDP in 2023 in the growth capital, venture capital, and private equity capital. We don't even have our own column in the whole data scheme. The Czech Republic is like 15 basis points, where you compare it, the data is coming from Invest Europe. The average of EU is almost 50 basis points of 20 trillion, which is approximately the GDP of European Union. If you compare it to US, it's 6.5% of GDP. This is like massive and huge gaps. And if you translate it to the biotech sector or life sciences in general, because it's probably better to talk a bit broader. In Slovakia, and Michal is going to talk about it a bit more in detail, we have only a handful of companies that are investable. So to say, okay, we have to throw capital on companies, it's not really going to help. It has to go hand in hand with, mobilizing universities, hubs that are specializing. That is actually a specialty of US that, for instance, focus on Massachusetts and Boston, where, for instance, Moderna has emerged. And be specialist in that kind of segment in a certain kind of areas of Europe, and then throw capital on it. That is the other part of the mobilization. So here in Slovakia and Czech Republic, I think we have brilliant scientists, but the gap between the scientific and this kind of base research walk into the markets and into the businesses that are actually investable is still very, very, very big. And this is something which also in Crowdberry are trying to focus on, to bring the kind of innovation into investable kind of story.
And this is also one of the, probably part of the strategies that can really help to reverse the brain drain and taps into the topic that you opened, which is productivity. So Mr. Dvořák, what is your take on this? Can you also maybe give some specific examples of the action plan that we could, some actions that could actually help to reverse the brain drain, to help to attract more investment?
Well, we're looking at it from a broader perspective, not only sectorally, even though, as I said in the beginning, we will launch individual sector strategic dialogues. We must make business much easier all across Europe. That includes Slovakia. Too much of our top talent, and you are completely right that we have some top-level scientists, and it's just the link between science and business that is somehow lagging. So our talent is leaving the EU because it's easier to set up, to grow, build and grow their companies elsewhere. Also, too many companies, too many businesses are holding back their investment in Europe because of the red tape. And this is what I meant by simplification in the beginning. We need to act at all levels, and that is the European level, but also, let's say, continental level, but also national and local levels. We are going to launch a far-reaching simplification for our sustainable finance and due diligence rules. We want to create an environment that would be conducive for our SMEs to scale up their capacity to build, produce, and also innovate in Europe. But let's go further than this. Maybe going back to the single market alone, it has too many national barriers at national level. We have companies that, and this might be also your experience, that are dealing, when doing business in Europe, that are dealing with 27 national legislations. We have red tape, we have rules, we have many barriers, obstacles to business in the union. But this is something that we want to change at the European Commission level, and this is why we are proposing not 27 but 28th regime, as it is called. That would be a single set of rules for operators, for companies that are innovative, all across the Union. The 28th regime will be one regime for all, and that would be corporate law, insolvency law, it could be labor law, it could be taxation. One single and simple framework across the Union, because we believe that continental scale that is representing the whole Union and possibilities and opportunities that are there in the Union is our asset if we make it happen when we compare ourselves to China and the US.
And thank you for saying that, because that's a very specific strategy that the European Union is planning to implement. And I think you're speaking to the choir here in terms of simplifying the red tape and basically simplifying the rules. But Daniel, is there anything else that you would add on to that from your perspective, which we should then discuss maybe later in terms of the strategies or, you know, some inspiration based on the Draghi report?
Yeah, one of the keywords that actually was mentioned a couple of times also with the introductory speech at the commission of Mr. Draghi is that the competitiveness is one thing, the demography and immigration is the other. And when you have the countries like China, which are not really democratic, and US, which is actually getting transformed into a closed-end system. The immigration is one of the first things that is being addressed there. I think Europe needs to also address open-mindedness, because if the talent leaves, the talent has to come. And there is plenty of talent globally, plenty of talent, because you're changing the single market. Increasing the access to capital is one thing. But a nice story from Germany, and it's the Biotech, with the cooperation with Pfizer,
yes,
is actually a very good example of immigrants creating a super innovative biotech that can actually compete with a Moderna company, which is emerging in deep capital markets. So this is something that also will be a topic, I guess. And the 28th regime is something which I read about recently. It's a very good one because, for instance, we have 27 types of regimes for companies that we actually use for our investments, and there should be a kind of one single type of company for innovative businesses and startups that has better access to the single market and basically better access to regulation, because indeed you're right. I mean, fighting with 27 regimes, it's like not even to be described, you know? And the Americans, they go to Palo Alto. We will build here a company which will be global, will be used in China, Japan, Europe, and there we go. Mm-hmm. And they can try it and test it on the 370 million, 380 million market. We have to fight each border and go in and in. So this is indeed something which, for us as Crowdberry, as a small company operating in Czech and Slovak Republic, also relevant, more relevant than you would imagine, because a lot of the companies in our system are actually active Europe-wide.
Well, and to that fact, we do have a question here from Slido, Mr. Dvorak, about the level of regulation in the EU, and if the EU Commission is willing to or prepared to reconsider this level of regulation in light of competitiveness. I think you are partially already have addressed this question, but simple...
A small comment. Yes, I think I've answered this question. Of course, the Union is notorious for having this myriad of rules, which we have been trying to struggle with and address in the past. As well, be it the refit, be it all kinds of initiatives. But there is a small danger that is called gold plating, and we have seen this in the implementation of the structural funds. I don't know if you are familiar with the concept or with the word gold plating. This is a word that we use every time the member states creates a set of rules on top of the EU legislation that makes things more cumbersome for companies. And this has been an obstacle for many, many years, even though in a different context. But there is this risk that that gold plating might come to play, because sometimes people at national level believe they know better, and sometimes they do. But the EU regulation is always a result of long discussions and consultations, and it's always a compromise.
Yeah.
Which is difficult between 27 governments, and that is not unfortunately the Commission, but the European Council that basically decides then on that. So I'm not trying to put the guilt on someone else, but this is what is happening, and there's always a danger. And when we talk about collaboration and cooperation between the European, national, and local level, this we must have always in mind.
I think we're
create rules on top of what is already there and working.
I think we're at the right place right now, because AmCham is very familiar with the agenda of gold plating, and a lot of the committees of AmCham are regularly commenting on some of the national laws that are guilty of that, so to speak. So of course that does not help the rapidity, the fastness, which we also need based on what Daniel said. How can we be faster in attracting the business? Because a lot of these regulations come into place. We have to wrap up, even though this discussion is very interesting, I hope for the audience as well, but we do have more to come. So final question, which is also on the Slido, but I would like to maybe use it to summarize this discussion as well. There is a question about how could we get inspired maybe from the neighboring countries like Austria or Czech Republic, which are maybe stronger in the biotech. But I want to use it also to give you the opportunity to sum it up. So how can we be inspired, and what are maybe like 2 or 3 takeaways for the next discussion from you guys in terms of the steps and the inspirations that we can take to further discuss with the panelists. So Daniel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to reflect again on the Draghi report and go in the more detailed and specific setups. Czech Republic, for instance, has like 3 times as many investment funds, or almost 4 times many investment funds as Slovakia has. So typically, if you want to achieve something, you need the funding. Then you go to an environment where you know that you will get the Series A, Series B after the seed capital, and attract also funds from international environment. If you link it to the Draghi report and put it into the whole European Union, basically we have to really implement the patient capital kind of stepstones, put investment funds in the spotlight of pension funds, because we will have to address also the aging population in Europe. And the whole pension systems as we know them today are not really sustainable, with the exception of Netherlands, I believe, and maybe Sweden. So therefore, I mean, Austria has done a lot of good moves like 20, 30 years ago, and Michal is an expert on it because he actually studied there and worked there for a while, and utilizes the capital that has been already created in that country to reinvest it into the emerging biotech companies. Czech Republic, with the universities that are top of Europe, I would say, are combining this with already, let's say, broader private capital market that historically has been there in Czech Republic also 100 years ago. So these are the 2 kind of stepstones that we have to do if you want to get closer and stop the brain drain to our beloved neighbor.
I represent not the Czech Republic here, but the
EU,
let's say.
Only partially.
Only partially.
Yes.
I want to mention one thing, and that was, we didn't have time to discuss the Capital Markets Union, but I would like to pick on one word in this regard: savings. Savings. European household savings amount to 1.4 trillion euros. If we compare it with the US, it's only 800 billion, so a little more than a half of what we have here in Europe, money that is sleeping somewhere. The problem is that European companies are struggling to tap into this capital because our domestic capital market is so fragmented. On top of that, 300 billion euros of European families and household savings is leaving the European Union to be invested abroad every year. We're losing this money. So all in all, we do not lack capital. There is a lot of capital. We lack an efficient capital market that could turn those savings into investments. That's why I mentioned the savings and investments union that we need to build. But let me conclude positively. I think we have this plan, we have this ambition, but Europe has everything that there is that can make this happen. We have a private sector with a long tradition of innovation. We have a top-class workforce, very skilled workforce, even though there is still scope for improvement. We have a huge market of 400. It's the largest trading bloc in the world. We are the second strongest economy in the world. We have a unique social infrastructure. We are trustworthy, credible. We have the rule of law, etc., etc. We have credible institutions, mostly. We have transparent governance, etc., etc. So we can do this. We can. So let's make it happen.
It's great to see you so energized.
Well, absolutely. I think, let's do it and let's make it happen is definitely something that Michal Nešpor can tap into in his presentation, because he's going to talk about the investment opportunities in the region, and hopefully he will tap into your positive note here as we end this first round of discussion. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Please, a round of applause to our first guests, Mr. Radim Dvořák, the acting head of the European Commission in Slovakia, and Daniel Gašpar, the managing partner in Crowdberry. And now, as I teased you, we are going to invite on stage Michal Nešpor. I don't see him. Oh, yeah, he's coming from the back. Michal is going to talk about investment opportunities in health in CEE region. Please do keep asking questions through Slido. He's not going to answer them immediately, but he will be in the panel after, so he will be able to answer them after that. After his presentation, we will have a coffee break, so also to tease you on that. You have about 15 minutes, Michal. It's a tough job, but you'll do it. If the microphone works. Is the microphone working? Yeah, there you go.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. I'm still trying to process what was said on the panel before. So I'll try to implement it in the presentation within the time limits, which is something that we usually struggle because we have a lot on our minds and we're trying to pass it over to the audience. Why am I standing here now? And the slide shows HICEE. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Crowdberry, what we have done in the past 9 years, and how it is related to health, life science, and biotech investments. The Healthy Investment Centre Europe is a project, a consortium project funded by the EU, where a couple of CEE players, and I'm going to explain it a little bit more later, with Western part cooperate on connecting these two ecosystems and learn from each other, and also tap into potential opportunities in the CE market. And this is something that was also talked about before. We have a lot of funding that can be employed in the CE, and I'm going to give you an overview of what we have done. You know Crowdberry mostly. We are now in our 10th year of operations and activities, mostly in Slovakia and Czech Republic. We now have an investment platform with more than 10,000 registered private investors. Roughly 1,500–1,600 of these investors have already started investing in local and regional companies that have, though, an international or even global profile. We have also set up, later on our journey of expanding the capital ecosystem, investment funds, investing from pre-seed through seed into startups. We have set up a real estate fund that can invest in various types of infrastructure. So basically buildings with a business model around it. Somehow small and medium-sized enterprises, and also an impact fund to tap into investment opportunities that bring something else on top of a financial return. Altogether, we have more than 100 portfolio companies through these 4 areas of investment funds. We manage and have invested more than 130 million euros, out of which I think more than 70% is private capital, 30% is capital that we leveraged through EU funds and added private capital on top of it. We have distributed more than 7 million euros in capital back to our investors, who have realized returns somewhere between 14 and 22. About what types of these companies are, and what they do and what they have achieved leveraging the private capital in terms of results. Those 12 companies have received over 20 million euros of capital through our investment structures. That is from private investors and also our investment funds. And on top of these 20 millions, additional roughly 15 to 20 million were leveraged beyond that by additional investments from co-investment partners, but also unlocking grants that prerequisite that there is a private investor already on board of the company. So these are the results. This is sort of an overreaching overview of the portfolio. It now employs more than 2,000 employees. I think on the panel before we talked about quality, knowledge-based, information-based economy employees. Though these are the people that are in highly qualified and very well-paid jobs, creating value added at these companies. The companies generate close to €500 million in revenue by now, and the value of all of those companies, and that includes startups all the way to companies that are targeting 200 million euros in revenue, comprise a portfolio value of roughly 750 million and beyond. So these are the results, and in light of that, I would like to show you, if this works, some results in our health and biotech portfolio. Thank you. And this is also the reason why we have joined the HICEE project, which aims basically at capacity building in the health sector in CEE by connecting 2 worlds. One is the CEE world, the other is what they call more developed regions, where capital markets are already developed, startup support organizations, tech transfer organizations are already in place for decades, and the CE region is supposed to learn from this more developed region on one hand, and on the other hand, we are trying to bring outside and international investors into the CE region, because that's where we see opportunities to invest, because of some gaps in the region, where we think that by employing money at reasonable valuations, we can provide our investors and our investment funds with superior returns. This is an overview of the early stage investment. I have to say, depending on which statistics you take and trust, the numbers are going to differ, but it gives you sort of an overview of the CE region, especially in health. you can see on the other slide, I'm gonna show the health sector. On this slide, you can see that the CE region is heavily lagging behind the rest of EU, especially more developed regions, and that there is a huge gap of funding. The numbers are not going to be precise because there is a lot of, I would say, unreported data. But the trend is clear. There is huge potential to increase the number of startups by supporting the pre-seed and seed stages with capital, and build really valuable companies by connecting them to further capital. This is an overview of the VC investments. And again, the statistics are going to differ a little bit, but it gives you an overview. CE average, apologies, that's Slovakia actually, it's 12 euros per capita. EU average is 78. It's a huge gap. If you look at other statistics and also on private equity capital, which was mentioned on the panel before, the gap is even larger because what the region is generally lacking is follow-on investment. So the big tickets, the big rounds, where the companies can really go and foster their international competitiveness. Most of them are unable to raise in the EU, then leave usually to the US. But what we see is increasing government and EU support generally. We have been talking about Slovakia. Depending on which government we have, the support varies and fluctuates. So I'm very hopeful for Slovakia's future. In the meantime, we are trying to fill the funding gap by mobilizing private investment money. How am I doing with time? Five more minutes. Okay, good. I'll speed up. I think it was mentioned among the discussion of David and Dano that we have to deal with demographics, and we also see this as an opportunity, especially in combination with the fact that the region, and if I'm looking at Slovakia and Czech Republic, there is a huge investment debt in technology, in infrastructure, in education and people. I've only mentioned technology infrastructure because this is something that private investors and investment funds can actually help build and invest in. We still see that there is affordable, high-quality talent, even though we are fighting with brain drain. But at Crowdberry, we believe that brain drain and quality talent is a function of available capital. If companies can pay well-educated and experienced peers, they will come back to even less developed ecosystems like CE. If you look at R&D and clinical trials, I saw a statistic somewhere, you can still do clinical trials at 2/3, 50% to 70% of the cost of Western peers, depending on which countries you look. This is also the reason why there is a few contract research organizations that flourish around the region, because Western peers actually address them and ask them to do the R&D and clinical trials here. This is one statistics about the current market size of the healthcare market in CE. If you look at overall investments in venture capital in CE and then only take the part of healthcare, it's hugely unrepresented. It's very small. You see that in the past 4 years, it's going to be 5 now, it's roughly 200 startups that raised money. It's nothing. And it's less than 100 million in funding for CE healthcare startups per year. It's really nothing. There is a huge gap, a huge opportunity to look for very good talent and companies and push money on them at reasonable valuations from an investor's perspective. Okay, what are we missing? And I think this is these are the major obstacles for more capital to be mobilized. The CEE region is still very unconnected to other ecosystems. If you look at VC in CEE in general, 50% of the capital comes from national and regional sources. So it's national funds, usually EU money and government-sponsored venture capital funds that invest only in their country, and some part of the money is then invested regionally, which means that there is a huge potential to address and bring foreign investors, international VCs, into the region to get a corroboration of the value that is being created here. We haven't seen any major exits in the healthcare and health segment. There is a few exits, even wealthy exits, in other industry verticals, and we believe that health is going to follow if you as an investor are part of the game early on. This is why we also said that health and healthcare investments are going to be a focus of Crowdberry. No major exits means no major returns for investors, which then would be reinvested in the ecosystem, which is usual. Once the founders earn money, they usually support their own ecosystem and invest into other companies as business angels. I said it many times, I think, and we believe at Crowdberry that pushing more capital into local companies will help accelerate the ecosystems in order to start catching up. Not catch up, but start catching up. I took the liberty to put a few logos on the slide here. This is a small group of companies, mainly in Slovakia, some of them in Czech Republic, that we have seen around. The verticals on the left is usually the companies from CE region where we see that are looking for money. Diagnostics, biotech, medtech, digital health, less in pharmaceuticals, because pharmaceutical development, drug development is extremely expensive. We don't have the capital markets for it, and we don't have the history. So what we see is usually lighter business model that don't require that much capital. We also see infrastructure deals, so modern clinics like Váš Lekár, the polyclinic outpatient treatment center, other treatment centers and senior homes. I mean, I'm gonna show two examples out of our own portfolio. And then companies which have business models at the intersection of these verticals, because usually they use a medtech combined with some kind of software and AI, or biotech combined with some kind of software and AI. So we would see a complex business model in this space. And unfortunately, I'm not going to say luckily, but unfortunately, most of these companies we have funded, and our investors have funded. Why unfortunately? As Daniel said, we would like to see more investment funds and investors in this region investing in this space, in private companies in general, but also in healthcare, in the healthcare sector. I'm going to show you two areas, two verticals mentioned on the slide before out of our own portfolio. Multiplex DX and glycanostics are both biotechs, one in the late stage cancer diagnostics segment, glycanostics in the early cancer diagnostic segment. Both companies, when we started talking to them, Multiplex DX 2017, Glycanostics 2021, there was scientific background by the founders, scientific potential, nothing else. no infrastructure, no patent, no product, except for Multiplex, which had a few fractional products that they have sold to a couple of customers abroad. The private capital leveraged at both companies receiving EIC grants. Multiplex DX is the first company directly from Brussels. A huge appreciation of their vision. Glycanostics was the third company in Slovakia to receive such prestigious grant directly from Brussels. These kind of grants require that you have a first private or institutional investor. Otherwise, you don't get a mark high enough to even receive the seal of excellence, notwithstanding the grant directly from Brussels, which means that you have to outcompete roughly 2,500 to 4,000 other companies from you. This is what they manage. Multiplex DX on the 10th attempt, Glycanostics I think on the 2nd or 3rd. This led to other grants which they can leverage on top of the private investors and actually accelerate their path to their ultimate goal, which is to develop the diagnostic test in each of their area. Multiplex DX in breast cancer diagnostics and Glycanostics in 11 types of cancers. We have closed an 8 million pre-seed A round at Multiplex DX, thanks and with the help of Crowdberry investors, which have put together 3 million in private money, which then leveraged 2 other funds, which put on 5 million on top of it. That's still not enough. They will need to raise now a 20, 30, 40, 50 million euro round, either from a pharma company or an international investor. That's a huge challenge. Glycanostics, we are now raising and completing a 5 million pre-seed A round. 40%, so 2 million was already raised. And what they have actually achieved is to finalize the design of the prostate cancer test with a French contract manufacturing organization yesterday. So now they will flip to a small clinic study and then to a larger study for which we are already talking to international investors. So these 2 companies, as Biotech out of Slovakia, have the opportunity and prerequisite to actually attract international investors. The flip side is the lack of infrastructure. Váš Lekár is a modern polyclinic or outpatient treatment center. Is Paolo here still? Okay, time. There. When we started talking, you managed 3 pilot outpatient clinics, and you started building the now functioning and working polyclinics with your own money, and then tapped into private investors who helped you build a company which this year is going to achieve break-even. This is also something that can be achieved with private capital. Dubravská Oáza is a modern center for elderly care. It's the last slide, promising. We were dragging in private investors to a construction site almost outside of Bratislava in 2017. It was a ruin. We showed them some visualizations. This is how it is going to look like. They have given the project leap of faith, and now we have a full occupied modern treatment center with a Western type of service for 24/7 care and Alzheimer's wing. This is something that usually the public sector should fund. We all know that it's not happening. This is where private investors' money has filled the gap of lack of private funding for such treatment facilities. And we are looking at doubling the capacity because there is still room. So the investors should see in the long run, this is what they have invested in, appreciation of their investment. That's it. And I'm looking forward to the next panel discussions, because we will have investors from VC funds who are representing investment funds that invest in the CE region. So I would like to hear back and reflect on this presentation with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. You can give him an applause. And let's go, this is not working, but a break. So we have about 15-minute break, 15, 20 minutes. Please enjoy the coffee and some refreshments, and we'll be back with the panel discussion after. Teraz poprosíme si posadať, kľudne si zoberte so sebou nejaké pitíčko alebo hocičo a pokračovali by sme. Volíte, tak by sme pomaly začali s touto panelovou diskusiou. Let us start with the panel discussion, please. So if you can take your seat, I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming our panelists for the panel discussion. We have Michal Nešpor, whom you've already seen, partner of Crowdberry, and he already had his presentation, which we will be inspired by, and hopefully tap into something what you've outlined. So welcome, Michal.
Thank you, and looking for a lively discussion.
We have Pavel Marcinko, who was also mentioned as one of the examples in the presentation. He's the CEO of the Outpatient Treatment Center, Váš lekár. So welcome.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation.
Emilia Mamajová, who is the founding partner of Espira Investments. Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Martin Smatana, healthcare analyst, and he likes to be introduced as the one and only.
Thank you for the invitation.
I remember it from the last AmChem event, so I thought I would be using it from now on. So welcome, Martin. And we also have two online panelists, Tomáš Pačinda, who is the general partner of Kaya Venture. He's, hopefully we have you. Hi, Tomáš.
Yes. Good morning, thanks for having me.
And Celestin Garcelon, who is the program manager of EIT Health. So Celestin, welcome.
Yes, hello, good morning, and thanks for the online arrangement.
We appreciate your branded, the branded HICEE background. So yeah.
We've worked on it.
Good. lady and gentlemen, you're the only lady here except for me, so we should maybe start with you. But the one question for all of you to sort of get back to the discussion before, and I will try an experiment here, because we usually conclude with the summaries and, you know, the takeaways. But I would like to challenge you, if you could very briefly, with one sentence, tell us from the discussion we've had, what is the one sort of takeaway that you think we should be discussing in the debate here? If you look at this topic and what was said so far, what do you think is really the one thing that we should be bearing in mind when we talk about investments and CEE and the tapping for potential in the region for the region? Martin, I'm deliberately looking at you. You're avoiding my stare, but we will start with you. You know that.
Well, my takeaway would be not to give up, because despite the situation, the climate, everything's happening, I believe that we are not far away from making the environment, the context, much more suitable for investments. And I will later explain why do I think this is the case.
Excellent response. So not to give up. Emilia.
I think when I was listening to Michal's presentation that there have been no successes from VC in healthcare, I was actually disagreeing with it, because I know of successful cases in healthcare sector coming out of this region. Maybe they don't have a label of being a VC-backed investment, but they are in fact from the industry, and we've seen GeneProof in Czech Republic, in vaccination business, medtech companies, etc. So I would maybe highlight more the success stories to the investors, to entice new investors coming into the VC space, seeing the successful, I would call them SME companies, bringing international capital at their exit time. And there were a number of them, Alpha Medical, the diagnostics chain, etc. So I would say promoting and marketing, this is something we're not very good at in this region. So I would try to highlight.
So it's a very nice, you know, liaison between your two answers, because you're saying let's not give up, and you're saying let's be a little bit more positive about the examples of what's actually going on in the region, and not like constantly maybe talk only about the challenges and how it's not working, because there are examples of how it is working. So that's excellent. Thank you very much. Pavel?
Since we are so optimistic.
Yes.
Well, for me, as an owner of the company, I think we have a lack of talents and lack of capital in Slovakia and in CEE region. So I think we should focus not only on keeping talent and talented people and domestic capital within our borders, but also attract foreign capital, also attract talents from other countries, not only from the CEE region, but from all around the world.
Yes, and I do want to talk about this because I was very intrigued by what you said, Michal, in your presentation. I even wrote it down, which I usually don't, which is that brain drain can be bought out, really. You said, like, okay, if you invest a lot of money and people are sort of feeling that they are inspired by the finances, let's call it this way, motivated, then you're saying they will come here and they will start working here. And I really wonder what your opinions are on this. We have one returnee here, Martin, who lived abroad and came back, so I want to ask him also. Well, me too, but I'm not a part of this discussion. But Michal, you had a presentation, so you're in an unfair position a little bit, but your takeaway for the discussion, what you would really like to maybe talk about or the audience to bear in mind?
I'm really glad I have a controversial reply and a reaction to my presentation. That's what I was hoping for. I would actually also second what you said, Emilia, that we should put success stories, even though not the whole return cycle for investors, private investors and VC investors have been completed yet. There are successes of a few companies which are pretty much far away towards exit, and I think we should present the CE region and these successes more, which is also one of the objectives of the HICEE project.
Mm-hmm. Good. Tomáš, going to the guys online.
So it's quite difficult to react with one sentence after I heard everything from previous speakers, but my one sentence would be, let's unlock more private capital into healthcare and biotech.
Let's unlock more private capital, and we will talk about how to do it, hopefully. So get ready for that follow-up question. Thank you so much. Celestin, finally, what about you?
Yes, so I think that to give trust in the region is very important, and to do that, there is the spotlighting of success stories, as you've said before, but also bringing like the right people together in the same room to foster connections between international and local investors and all types of stakeholders involved at this point.
Good. So I think we have one concluding sort of inspiration from all of you, sort of a way where you agree, and that is, let's talk more about the successes, and let's talk about how it's possible to do it. And of course, there come a lot of obstacles on the way, but we can maybe slowly, look at them and talk about how to avoid them or how to get around them. So let's get into some of the things you've said and how to get around it. So Martin, you started with a very optimistic note. Thank you for that. Let's not give up, even though the obstacles are on the way. You are a healthcare analyst, in Slovakia, so you know very well how the system works here. There's a lot of debate about, do we have enough money in the sector? Don't we have enough money in the sector? And also what the balance should be between the public and the private. So could you maybe comment on that from your perspective and from what we are talking about here? What is the situation in Slovakia, and what, in your opinion, could be the opener for the private sector in terms of biotech and healthcare?
Okay. So you opened several questions
yes,
on topics.
You can choose one.
And in fact, I'm not sure if I would call myself an analyst in Slovakia, because I don't spend that much time here anymore. I'm usually all around
You're
Europe.
a global
yes.
analyst.
Especially in the CE region, Romania, Bulgaria, because these are the countries that are trying to change the healthcare system a lot. And I would like to say 2 points. The first point, and in regards to what Tomáš said, is that when you look into the most of the countries in the CE, one of the biggest issues they have when it comes to reducing the risk of private investment into the ventures is that they have too many obstacles, too many, let's say, induced costs and great uncertainty, right? And if you look into the best practices in the EU and try to spot which of the best practices could be applied in Slovakia or Bulgaria or Hungary, I would go for NHS. I know the NHS is an awful system, but NHS innovation hubs and NHS innovation services are two, let's say, innovations or two ideas that can be easily replicated in Slovakia, and maybe you do not know what the innovation hub is. So in the UK, if you have an idea or startup, in the NHS, let's say, regions, you always have one entity, usually it is the largest hospital in the region, that is supposed to collect all these ideas, evaluate them, and create an opportunity for a pilot, which can be then evaluated and rolled out. And this is done from the, let's say, it's organized by the NHS, but it is driven bottom up from the ideas. And then they have NHS Innovation Services, which is an official body which helps these startups to do all the data processing, all the work, so they have as little cost as it's possible. And through this, they can really fast track the piloting of the innovations, and then they can deliver value. And this is something which I know that the UK is not anymore in the EU, but they created this during the period when they were in the EU, so it is all conforming to our legislation, to our processes, and this is something that is lacking in Slovakia, because if you have an idea, you don't know where to go, who to speak to, how to speak to the person, and this would help a lot. And at the same time, the entities are evaluating the projects, and they are considering investments also from the public resources, so they are basically creating PPPs on the spot in the regions as they go, and I like this idea a lot, and this is something which is lacking in Slovakia and most countries in the CE. Right?
Yes, and this was something that was mentioned in the first part of the debate as well, that, how to create space for sort of public-private partnerships in an easier way without getting into the obstacles so much.
And I have one last point,
yes.
I'm sorry for talking for that long, and the reason why I was so optimistic is that in 2022, I think, we were not that far from establishing something like this in Slovakia, but then once again the health minister changed. As you know, average tenure of minister in Slovakia is 18 months. But once again the idea is on the table as a part of the Michael Stovko State Secretary's list of the projects, and they would like to establish such agency under the Ministry of Health. So finally there will be an official body to talk to, official body to evaluate the project, official body that will like give a green light or let's say rate the riskiness of the project, which is something that will help a lot.
Mm-hmm. And
yes. Who asked when?
Someone is asking when, which is a good question.
Yeah, because that's the person who was actually responsible for that before the change of the minister. So, so he can confirm that it was a very good idea, right?
He's just...
Yes, but well, it depends on what happens during coming weeks. But last week they had the first meeting with the minister about this project. So hopefully, in coming weeks, depending on the situation.
Yes, but this is something that is probably very much, and it was mentioned when we talked about the examples from the CEE, you know, this constant sort of partnership between the state, the academia, right, but also, you know, the business community, and how to boost this kind of ecosystem also in the other countries. Maybe, Emilia, you also mentioned that there are a lot of, you know, success stories. Is this something that is owed to the success? Is it, you know, were some of the success stories that you mentioned part of this ecosystem, benefiting from this ecosystem, or would you say there's some other aspects that really come into the play?
I think the companies I mentioned and the companies we look at, because we, as Aspira Investments in the past and Everita Capital as a new fund which will build on Aspira's experience, we're looking at SME segment, and a lot of these companies, I would call them in today's terms, bootstrapped. Yeah, so they were like started by founders because they had a medical or research or scientific background, or there was some kind of a trigger why they went into healthcare because of some personal experience with bad service or family member having health issues and starting to research the area. And only after they were profitable and sustainable, they raised some capital for growth. So these are the types of companies we look at. And I would say that the situation is currently, there is much more capital in the market for these startups. I think they can also look at the universities. I know there is also technology transfer fund in Czech Republic, INI Biotech, which is something like another idea for Slovakia, but that would require more funding on the university levels to do that. But for us as a target, we're not looking at these early stage companies. We're looking at companies that have already shown some success, and we want to build on that and help them expand, whether within the country or ideally regionally, to go abroad. And it's services, businesses, it can be also medtech. We've seen also 3D printing in healthcare, clinical research, which can be done across the region. It was mentioned today also by Daniel. So there are a lot of areas where we see an opportunity for our fund.
Absolutely, and we can also talk about that, you know, how to attract this more investment, not only for the startups, but really for the, you know, SMEs, for the scaling up, as was mentioned even before. And I think we have good panelists also online who can speak into that. But Michal, maybe still for you, a question for you regarding Crowdberry, because you mentioned some examples as well during your presentation of companies, I would call them already companies, not really startups, but they are valid companies that really managed to somehow, even though it was difficult, get some investment, you know, from the Brussels, or but are still ahead of a very challenging road. So how can we look at, and you know, one of them is sitting here, so Pavel will certainly talk about it. How can we look at this ecosystem that we're speaking about in terms of, you know, really helping the companies be successful and attract that investment from abroad?
How much time do we have?
Less than for your presentation.
Okay. I mean, you took the note of buying out talent. It's a bit of a broader topic. It's not just buying out. I mean, you have to get the people to buy into the company that they join, and also in their value. So, like participation, employee stock ownership plans. For that, they need to believe that there is going to be value built. For that, you need to capital. You need an ecosystem. There is a lot of things that can be done. We already have some Slido questions that go in that direction. I mean, we can help the companies get successful if it make it easier for investors to invest into these companies, to show value, and then international capital will find these companies. But we can't give up, as Martin said. We need to bridge the gap until they reach this level, and that's extremely difficult because they need to navigate muddy waters in terms of talent, in terms of regulation, in terms of taxation, in terms of law, regulation, and in terms of capital, which we see. And government doesn't give a lot of support, unfortunately, so far in this area of private capital.
But clearly it is possible because we do have companies that are successful, and Pavel, you have one company like that.
I'm sorry, the fact is we should see that times 100, and that's the point.
Exactly. So we are speaking about there is a few examples, but we want to attract more. There's one question where we will get to, so what do we do to attract more? But Pavel, maybe, you are sort of presented as a success story. So where do you owe the success, or who do you owe the success to? What did you have to overcome, and how did you manage?
Well, it started like 6-7 years ago. We started with one pharmacy, then one general practice, and we added more practices and more practices. But it wasn't enough to create environment for a patient that he would have everything under one roof, and that he wouldn't come to a clinic only when he or she has health problems, but also as a healthy person. And that's our vision, that we want to treat also healthy persons, healthy people, because we are one of the worst countries in European Union in regard of prevention. So the idea was trying to look at the current ecosystem differently, not only treating but also preventing diseases. And our success, I think, we had a great help with Crowdberry, because we were struggling to get funds, because me and Dr. Bayer, we founded a polyclinic Váš Lekár, and we had limited resources. Without external capital, without fundraising, we wouldn't be able to open 24 clinics, 24 specialties, but only 7 or 8 of them. And during the time we talked to VC funds, they told us it's too early for us, we need to see something bigger, something more stable, come to us next year or in 2 years. We also talked to the banks. For banks, it was even more difficult to look at this case, because they also need a stable company that has history, not only managing 4 or 6 practices, but much bigger. And they told us, well, open another 4 and then come to us again next year or in 2 years. And that's when we started talking with Crowdberry, and they saw the opportunity how we can scale up quickly, because with another 4 or 6 practices, we wouldn't be able to provide services that we are providing right now. And it wouldn't be a successful story. It would be just another clinic that in Bratislava or in Slovakia, there are so many of them. So we wanted to have added value in that.
Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of the value, the trust, and the opportunity, right? And when that's the right mix, and of course the capital, and then it can somehow start to grow. But I want to look at, you know, this question of, okay, we do have some success stories. We have identified some of the obstacles on the way. And we do have some, you know, people here actually making that decisions, you know, when and how to invest. And my question is to Tomáš online, you know, let's get a little bit deeper into the question, okay, so how do we actually attract more investment into the region? You know, it was mentioned already that we are in the hunt for talent, also more for the global talent. But what else, in your experience, would help the region?
Yeah, so just maybe briefly for the context, we as a fund, we have a portfolio of 8 healthcare startups. Big majority of them is in software space. So yes, it is in the healthcare vertical, but these are software companies. We do have 2 companies, which are, I would say, semi-hybrid type of clinics with strong software element, but they do have operations as a clinic. And I think, you know, the main problem, if you look at healthcare and biotech in particular, is that in a simple terms, the feedback loop is too long. And maybe that's what Michal meant when he said that, you know, it takes some while until the company will build the initial traction or initial presence or whatever type of, I would say, maturity. And since this feedback loop is longer than with other venture-backed investments, I would say that is unfortunately discouraging some of the VCs, especially generalist VCs, to invest in healthcare because, you know, their lifetime of the fund is 10 years, but sometimes the lifetime of those investments, and again, especially in biotech, is closer to 15 to 20 years. So I think what could help is, you know, despite having big number of early stage venture funds, especially in Czechia, and having 1 biotech early stage fund, I still believe that we don't have enough of specialized general partners or managers that could back those investments with long-term investment horizon. And the reason why we don't have those general partners with this kind of approach is because we don't have enough limited partners or, let's say, fund investors with this kind of attitude or sentiment. So I think this is where it starts. That's why all the early stage generalist VCs are much more attracted to software bets and to the bets that are, you know, showing results typically very early on after 12 months with first customers, first revenues, and that's very different for healthcare startups. And then we can continue on why we don't have you know, enough limited partners with this kind of long-term investment horizon. I will try to make it shorter, but I think this is going back to what Daniel mentioned during the initial presentation or panel, and it's going back to the fact that we do have enough capital in Europe. We do have enough long-term capital in Europe, but unfortunately, this capital is not looking or not investing in the venture capital funds. And we mentioned pension scheme and pension funds, and I think this is one of the best examples we can look at, right? So this is typical example of long-term capital available being on the market, but rather investing into public markets than doing more bold bets.
Celestin, can you maybe build on what Tomáš said in terms of your experience in the CE region? Do you find that it's sort of your experience as well, what Tomáš is saying in terms of the barriers or in the region?
Yes, definitely. And so within HICEE, we have a program for startups, and that's something we've seen also in the applications that most of the companies that are actually in the region are medtech and digital health companies and diagnostics, and very few biotech, and that's linked to everything that Thomas has said. And so yes, there would be this question of attracting more international investment with VCs that have longer term horizon with more than a 10-year horizon. But to do that, it's like the snake biting its tail, because the international investors are looking for locally anchored VCs that they trust. So they're looking for trusted partners in the region. But what we've heard from them at EIT Health is that they do not know many or not enough, and that's one of the elements that hinder them going to the CE region, is that they don't want to go alone in markets that they don't know, but they do not know how to access the right partners who can co-invest and with whom they can build a syndication.
Right. So you're saying that, okay, there is enough capital in Europe. Maybe one of the reasons why it's still not working in the way we hope for is that is this search for the right partnership, is the visibility. You mentioned the talent, so I think we are putting together some of the sort of challenges in the system. But the good news is that there are programs, and the four of you are sitting here because you are thinking about it differently in terms of the opportunity. So maybe I would like to switch back more to this optimistic note where we started, in the sense, can we provide some specific examples of the programs maybe that you are providing or that exist here that could that really are trying to help the SMEs to in healthcare and biotech to rise and shine in the region? Emilia, you can start maybe.
Okay. So as I said, we invest in profitable businesses that have at least 4 or 5 million euro revenues. And we come at a growth stage, we call it. So we're looking to help them expand, either grow the capacity, go regionally, do buy and build, consolidation. This is especially appealing if we acquire a smaller asset that is in a very fragmented segment of the healthcare, then we can consolidate more of the players and realize quite a nice profitability increase just through having more efficient operations, more digitalized processes, which in healthcare sector is still a big topic. Even in big polyclinics, you can still find people working with papers rather than digital tools. So this is a huge space for productivity improvement, as we also discussed today. So this is the area where we see our big value add, also helping to transition from this like old economy way of working to a more kind of digital. We're looking, for example, in Aspira Investments, we invested in an aesthetic medicine clinic. And we're looking to expand to other specialties. So it started with all just women beauty, but it's now orthodontics. And now another big area that we're exploring is women's health in general. So we are able to provide growth capital to projects that are targeting at very specific kind of areas. You might not be aware of it, but women were not included in medical research until 1993. So all the pharmacy, everything, basically all the medical drugs, everything is tested only on men. And only now in recent years we know that the effects are incredibly different for women than for men. And I see also menopause being a huge topic that is completely under-researched, under-diagnosed, under-treated. And there are a lot of female entrepreneurs, which is one of the angles of our strategy, that recognize this gap in the market in terms of services and products for women. And just in the last months, we've seen 3 or 4 projects that are specifically started by female entrepreneurs and targeting this kind of gap in the market that we have seen. So we go into growth stage, I would say. So we can't fund the companies that are very early on, but as soon as they are sustainable, we can come as a partner for their further expansion.
Michal, how do you see this potential for the private sector to help foster this growth? And maybe what's interesting here is that everybody, I think, is trying to identify the gaps so that you then reflect on it with, the match of the private capital. So if you can comment on that, maybe.
Difficult. I mean, Crowdery's role is to fundraise and help the companies with capital until Emilia comes in, basically, or until Tomasz sees some value that has been built, and he can then, in 3 or 4 years, exit the company after the initial growth phase. I mentioned in my presentation and when we were doing some statistics that 15%, 1/5, that's over 20 million of what we manage and have invested so far, went into health-related and biotech companies by Crowdberry investors and our funds only. I think that's not enough. I mean, for the biotechs that I mentioned to get to the next level, they have to combine, in combination raise 50 to 70 million euros. This is something that we cannot provide because of regulative limitations. That's where we have to turn to other investors and outside investors. And until then, we need to basically give them as much money as, or try to raise as much money until they can reach this point, which is difficult because they don't have enough capital to do the jump. What can be done?
Yes, that's the question.
Leveling tax incentives would be great. We almost had it. Basically not discouraging and putting private investors who put money into this asset class to a disadvantage in terms of tax. This is what's happening in Slovakia and partly in Czech Republic. If you just level the tax incentives among other industry and investment verticals, that would basically help to divert a lot of capital that is being invested elsewhere or not invested at all into this asset class. That would help.
There's even one question from the Slido, right? That and maybe going back to you, Martin, that you know, there are some you know, obstacles that we mentioned, and some we are getting into what could be done. So if you look at it from this perspective, and you gave one example already of the innovation hubs that could be maybe part of the story, but what if you look at it also from the side of the public sector? What could be done to help you know, the biotech sector get better, get you know, get more attractive, and start even more sort of flourishing?
Yes, I believe actually is still related to the innovation hubs, because what we are lacking currently in most countries in the CE region is that we don't have any official framework or structure for supporting biomedical research. In most cases, the success cases are based because of there was a person or a group of companies that really pushed it, and because of that drive, they managed to overcome all obstacles, but we do not have any official framework structure, let's say some subsidies that would facilitate this process. And most countries, they have these kind of projects or initiatives. We do not have it, and this was supposed to be one of the outcomes of the initiative that I was discussing earlier. The tax subsidies are actually a great example of what could help, especially in healthcare, considering that most of the resources come from the public resources, which is actually already a form of tax, and we are actually taxing the tax, which doesn't make any sense. So in healthcare, I believe that these subsidies are one of the easiest forms that can at least to some extent reduce the hurdle, the obstacles that are in the sector. But from my perspective, the most important is to have a stable environment, considering that not only in Slovakia, but also in Czechia and other countries. In Romania, average tenure of a Minister of Health is 299 days, so less than a year. So in order to have a stability, you need to have official structures, official framework, so that if a government changes, if a minister changes, you will continue without being, you know, accused that you were a friend of this and that guy, because this is something which is very common in the region. So stability, framework, and yes, financial subsidies will always help.
Thank you.
If I may
yes.
It's as we are discussing, it's not only about capital, but also about efficacy. I mean, there are 2 points to it. One, there are some like very old bridges between academia and hospital or public providers, but I think it's very important to build new bridges between academia and private companies, and between public and private companies in healthcare, and even between private and private companies. That's what we are trying to achieve as well. We are trying to work with as many clinics, as many providers that we are able to, because we want to make healthcare more accessible for the patients. So we are not able to provide every service that exists for the patients. So we're trying to build bridges with other companies, with also hospitals, so we can provide more, we can provide better healthcare for the patient. And I think there is a lack of these bridges between between the institutions and the companies. And another point is that we are missing some, or we have too much regulation or too many regulations. We can provide healthcare to our patients more efficient and with more efficacy, and we are not able to. We know what we want to do. We have the specialists. We have also the pharmacies or the doctors. They are specialists in their specialty, but they are not able to do everything what they have knowledge of. So I think we are missing also not only the capital, but deregulation of some things. There has to be regulations, but not as many as we have. And as I said, we are missing some bridges between different companies and institutions.
Just quickly going back to you, Martin, and then I want to ask about how can we become Estonia, but regulation, deregulation, you have, you know, a lot of experience, not only in Slovakia, but also in, you know, in the region and globally. But speaking about Slovakia and what Pavel just said, is there space for deregulation in your opinion? Is there space and is there willingness in healthcare, right? Because he's saying that there's a lot of further potential, even in what they're doing right now, but there are some regulatory barriers. What, in addition to what you said, is there any other space, in your opinion, for deregulating more in healthcare?
You probably know very well that Slovakia has a tendency to over-regulate even the EU regulations. It's like our hobby, that our bureaucrats actually boast that they were supposed to implement EU regulation and they made it even more strict. So yes, for sure there is place to deregulate some bits and pieces, but I know I will sound as a bureaucrat, but from my perspective, it might be better to create new regulation that will facilitate these situations, because it may be so unique and so special and so specific that it may be very difficult to fit into existing frameworks and legislation. But there are countries which have a specific regulation focused only on piloting innovations, for example, to create a sandbox for them to play freely, and this may be the way. So it's probably even more regulation, but it may do the job.
That I agree with. I mean, let's throw everything in the trash and make new regulations. That I agree with.
I think this is one of the few panels that will actually have as one of the conclusions that we need more regulations. Wow, I didn't expect that, but interesting. Anyway, there's a question here about Estonia, and I know during the break we talked a lot about it as well, that this is sort of like the model country where we draw our eyes to. So can Slovakia or can the region become a little bit more like Estonia? And if so, how? Tomáš, Celestin, what do you think? Tomáš can start.
Yeah, happy to start. Look, I think this is too high level for me to answer something like that. I think Estonia has been on this path for a couple of decades, so it's hard to comment what can we copy or what is similar or what could be replicated. Maybe what I wanted to mention when speaking of region, I think if you look at Slovakia or Czechia, these markets are pretty similar from healthcare perspective. I mean, those two local markets. What is closer than Estonia is Poland. And if you look at Polish market, other than that it's bigger, obviously, because of the population, there is one element in Poland, and it's if you look at what is the overall healthcare spend and what's the percentage of public versus private money being spent in Poland in healthcare, you can see that private spend or out-of-pocket spend in Poland is much higher. The proportion is much higher compared to Czechia or Slovakia, where healthcare is still primarily driven by public money and public resources. And thanks to that, it enabled Poland to test much more new concepts and new propositions in healthcare, because simply they tested on commercial basis. They could look at the typical return on investment and similar type of measures, rather than just, you know, trying to address this big holistic vision of let's change everything, let's build something from scratch, etc. I'm honestly not a big believer of these kind of big visions and big missions. I think you have to do it step by step. You have to simply start by small things and continuously improve the healthcare ecosystem as we see it now. And maybe just two more sentences on regulation. I simply believe that regulation is always lagging the innovation, and that's just the fact. And you cannot do anything about it. That's just the industry. That's how the world is operating. So I think we can be innovative, and we have to be innovative, and the regulation will follow for sure if the concept and proposition is good. But it's going back to what we said a couple of times before. We cannot be innovative if we don't have enough of specialized capital.
So basically, more money and innovation will come. But also, what you're saying is, okay, sometimes it's good to take it step by step, little steps, and probably more private capital is something that you're saying. Okay, let's not talk so much about public. Let's open it up more to the private. It looks like you want to say something, Michal.
Just something that we were discussing when we are discussing investment and capital into Vajlekarden. I mean, healthcare should not be free. It's never been free, and people, like general public, will need to start paying out of pocket. That's coming back to Tomasz's comment. If you look back 35 years, when dentists started charging for their treatment, everybody thought it's outrageous. Now it's a common thing and everybody's used to it. And I think, and I agree with Tomasz, this needs to happen on a more larger scale in the healthcare sector. And then you will have more money, more capital, even in the healthcare companies and hospitals to try out new things, innovation, and also carry out significant investment. That's what...
Emilia wants to
I would maybe chip in also on this question around Estonia, because as far as I know, one of the factors that is also contributing to this dynamic ecosystem is the fact that they've had a few very successful exits in a technology space, and the founders who exited are using the capital to support other new startups in the country, and this has created like a very vibrant ecosystem of angel investing and supporting startups. And we've seen a little bit of that happening in Czech Republic, where a number of tech companies had really great exits, a few unicorns even. So these original founders are now backing new founders, but this is happening mostly in the technology kind of software space. But there are a few, like I would say again, maybe GeneProof from Brno, which is the company that we wanted to invest from Aspira, and we were maybe thinking too long and being too conservative on the valuation. The COVID came and their EBITDA went from 1.5 million euro to like 5 million euros or something like that. So they've exited to a US private equity shortly after for several times higher valuation than we were planning. But what is actually nice is that one of the founders, who was the researcher or like the biotech expert, is very passionate about the field, and he now has this small family office backing other startups in biotech. So it's like a little kind of a sign of something happening, and I think this is where private capital could come if we have more of the exits of any sort. It doesn't have to be in healthcare, that people are introduced to this space, even the tech entrepreneurs, to help support the growth in this segment as well, not just in technology.
Thank you. That's a good good inspiration maybe. Celestin, did you want to also chip into this whole debate, which started with how to become Estonia?
So 100% agreed with everything that has been said, but I would also add the fact that also the tech transfer offices need to be upgraded in some way, because at the very early stages of the startups, there is still a strong lack of business mindset. It's still a lot of I don't like to say it like that, but science for science. And it's important that at the very early stage, entrepreneurs start thinking about what can I do to be attractive to potential partners, and that's why also it's important to bring in private entities in the the startup support organizations. How do you build some small local networks who understand also the business side and not only the science side, and can bring also some input about the international standards? How can you see a few years ahead and start building your company around that?
This is interesting, and I think it goes back to your presentation, Michal, where you said, okay, we had, when Multiplex DX started, or Glycanostics, that they had excellent scientific leaders, and they had to learn how to be more business sort of minded, and this is exactly what Celenstan is saying now, that maybe if we're talking about the obstacles, it's not always on the public side, it's not even always on the private investment side, but it's sometimes on the side of the businesses that are starting, that sort of have to, come into the place of being able to move on the road. But we will have to wrap up soon. So two things that I want to do. There is one question on the Slido which I believe we have not addressed. The others I believe we have, which is, and this was mentioned in the Draghi report where we started, so it's going to be a nice loop. There are challenges like demographics, aging populations, chronic diseases. And the question goes to, okay, obviously we are speaking about how to address them, and there are things happening, there are businesses being started around them. We talked about cancer and so on. But I want to address the one word there, effectively. So how can we do it more effectively with the use of, private investment, healthcare innovation, and so on? Martin.
I will just answer the effectively, and the colleagues can add the bit about the private investors. From my perspective, it has to be said that it's actually the innovation which is causing the aging, and it's expensive, which is the reason why it is expensive. But the point is, it's possible to make it effective under the condition that innovations are spread, which means that it's mass-produced, available to everybody. From this perspective, due to economies of scale, it becomes cheap. And that's when the innovations make all these processes effective, and that must be the point, to make sure that we have innovation, and as fast as possible it is implemented on mass scale. That's the most crucial bit.
Mm-hmm. How about you guys? Do you agree with Martin's?
Yeah, I would look at it also from a different angle. It's through what we focus to invest in, and I would say looking at prevention and early diagnostics is definitely a field where we can save a lot of the troubles that come later on if this is not done properly. So I think this also is an area that we're looking like longevity, well-being, and all of these things that maybe become too much of a kind of a jargon now, but I think there is a substance behind them, and there's a lot of research that shows that early prevention can have a huge effect. I'll go back to maybe this women's health topic, which I mentioned, because you might not know, but women are twice as likely as men to have Alzheimer at the age of 60. And the changes start 20, 30 years in mid-age, basically, with the hormonal changes that happen in perimenopause. So the fact that menopause and perimenopause is not even a topic at all, and women are not aware of what they could be doing, how they could be treated, has a lot of knock-on effects later in their health. Is osteoporosis, is the cognitive decline, Alzheimer, it's a lot of other health issues that come as a result of the hormonal changes that happen in mid-age. And I think this is something that should be addressed, because living 1/3 of a life for women in not good health is really not optimal and costs the system a lot of money. So it's just an example.
And Pavel, of course, you will agree with the prevention part, I'm sure. That's what your business model is built on.
Yes, that's what I would like to follow. The people are aging. We can't stop aging. In average, we are living longer, but how active is our life, or how about the quality of our life? For example, in Slovakia, I think people in average live up to 76 years, more or less. But at the age of 50, 57, 58, they are not completely healthy. They are starting to have some chronic diseases. and they don't have as much quality in their life as they could have with early diagnostics and prevention. So I think we should focus more on longevity, more on prevention, and we would be able to work as well longer. We would be able to live longer, but live actively and have a quality of life.
And to close up, because I think we're nearing an end, there is a question here also about the risks, but I want to turn it into risks and opportunities as we wrap up this session, and as I want to give space to all of you in the sense that we started this panel with being very optimistic with the message, don't give up, but obviously there are some challenges that we encountered on the way. We named a few of them before and during this panel. So if we are to wrap it up, and Michal, maybe I'll look at you for this one to start this final round. You know, considering some of the risks, or naming some of the risks, some of the opportunities, and you know, the takeaway from that, if we are talking about, okay, the CE region should really be the region to boost this investment into biotech and healthcare sector.
So what risk should we take into?
So what are the risks? What are the opportunities? If you were to maybe name a few as we conclude.
So very briefly, I mentioned in the presentation the opportunities that the environment and the ecosystem is very young, and usually then, as an investor, you can have favorable terms, right? That's the opportunity. I don't want to go very much into detail. The risks associated with specifically investing in healthcare, biotech, medtech, compared to every other single investment which all bear risks, is that you have what Tomáš said, the feedback cycle. It takes much more time to build a company in this segment. There are other types of risk like regulation. You need usually more capital in the later stages, which is hard to get. So when you invest in the early stage, as an investor, you run the risk that the company will not have enough money to get to be successful. And also what was mentioned is lack of talent. Mm-hmm. There is a couple. I'm thinking back at the risk disclaimers that we put to each of our investment opportunity, and with everything else you have increased risk also in terms of the product technology, in order for the science to work, in order for the science to be turned into technology into product, and then into commercialization, facing regulatory challenges, adoption on the market with new innovative products, and also competition from abroad.
So I want to conclude with the gentleman online with asking them, okay, so why is the risk worth it? You know, because Michal now mentioned a lot of different risks that are associated with investment, but I'm sure that the answer we want to leave with is, but it's still worth the investment. This is in the end what you're doing. So why is this all worth the risk? Why is it worthy to invest into healthcare and biotech in the CE region from your perspective? Celestin, let's start with you this time.
Yes, so I would say that some of the most significant challenges, healthcare challenges, and every type of regulation around, like the countries that are more developed, they face the same issues. And I was thinking of some clinical challenges like antimicrobial resistance, for which there is no real viable business model because of how the reimbursement is structured in this question. But all companies are facing the same issue, and yet everyone knows that this will be a major issue in a few dozens of years. So I think that we have the same issue, and it's the same thing, for example, for artificial intelligence. I think it was mentioned somewhere in the Draghi's report that the question is not like how can we hinder the development of AI, but more how can we benefit from it, and the challenges that are faced by CE companies. I can tell you that French and German companies face the same issue. So we're kind of at a similar stage in those areas, and that's why I think it's worth to take the risk in those markets that are not completely fixed yet.
So what you're saying, Celestine, is that we face some huge challenges in healthcare, like antimicrobial resistance. You mentioned, Emilia, the the Alzheimer's in women, for example, the cognitive decline. We have cancer. We have different challenges. The use of AI in healthcare and so on. But it's not just us facing it in the region. Obviously, it's the entire world facing them. So it is worth taking the risk because we don't want to leave it to the others, right? If we have some good business ideas, why not this region making the breakthrough? And I think that's a great message. Thank you for that. And Tomáš, maybe finally you, if we're talking about, why is it really worth it? What would be your take on it?
I think there are twofold. One is financial, and the second is that the health is the most important thing we have in our life. So that gives you the answer. But even if you look at it from investor perspective, and if you look at the most successful biotech companies, the returns there are amazing, right? So, I mean, these are two very obvious reasons why it is all worth the risk. Maybe just one more comment on the opportunity. I think I would probably disagree with Michal here. I think talent actually is our opportunity here in this region. I believe that we, as investors, simply have to work with founders from this region, no matter where they are based, no matter if they are now in London or US or whatever. We simply have to work with them. I think this region has the best reputation when it comes to building companies much cheaper. So I'm actually less worried about the efficiency. I think we have the highest number of bootstrapped unicorns in this region compared to rest of the Europe. But we have to work on, finding those founders and working with them. And in some cases, I think there is also a good opportunity to bring that research capability and facilities, bring them back home by, building local research centers. So that's where I see big opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I think it goes back to the beginning where we started with the Draghi report, which also is reflecting on the, let's say, hunt for talent, on the reverse brain drain. What you're saying is that you believe that Europe does have the brain. It's just a matter of getting to it. And sometimes we create maybe barriers in terms of the space or, proximity or something like that, which might be unnecessary because the people are here. And it's also up to us, and our innovative approach is how to get to them and how to tap into the potential in the brain of the region, no matter where the brain is. So I think that is a nice way to conclude this session because, in a way, it goes back to how to boost competitiveness, and this is one way to do it. And of course, the other part, what you said, was the financial part, that it's still, there is some return on investment, and that's why we're here in the end. And the return on investment is financial, but it's also, in a way, ethical, right? Because we're speaking about healthcare here and really making people's lives better in the end. So thank you very much, lady, gentlemen, for joining us in this discussion. Thank you to the audience for staying and listening to us and, popping up some questions through Slido as well. And we're done. So thank you very much for being with us, and we will certainly look forward to welcoming you at some other AmCham events. And until then, have a nice day and enjoy some more refreshments and networking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.